毎日辞書を使います。
毎日辞書を使います。使います。辞書を使います。You know, oh no, Indy's not here. I'm not sure about this. I've always wondered if you have a native language, right? If you have a native language that is coming from a monocultural conformity language, do you hear things much like other people hear things in their native language? So for example, I always thought about this. Maybe I'll find some documentation or some anecdote things. So a lot of times when people talk about, using English, if you, whatever your native language is, let's just say a native language, right? Your native language. And oftentimes when you're learning a secondary language, the biggest comment that happens subconsciously, a lot of times they refer to as it subconsciously, as in you hear, the native person hears something early on with respect to their native language from the secondary language. So a lot of times people can say like, oh, I'm saying and hearing this. And then someone from the secondary language says, well, you are hearing it differently for a while and saying it differently, because someone just, it's my thought that came to mind when this person dropped in and say it's fun to listen to an English speaker speak Japanese, right? I imagine the fun is more like omoshiroi, fun. So for me, I started thinking like, what if you're coming from a monocultural place, which is Japanese. So 99% of the population is like native Japanese is 99% in a single pop, right? What if they want to hear, so now it's not talking about the Japanese that I'm speaking, but they want to hear because they know the person they're listening because they know the person they're listening to is American or like non-Japanese, basically non-Japanese. The reason why I say this is because it does happen, and it happens to me all the time, where if someone doesn't see my face, they would hear me clearly in English. However, sometimes from time to time, but it's less so in the United States because you expect English to vary in English. So when they see my face, it becomes harder to hear what I'm saying. So my question really is, oh wait, Indy, you're still here. I thought you were resting your eyes. So I don't know if it's happened just now, but a lot of times when people, like for example, this happens to me even with my English, right? And it happens to other people who are great at Japanese. And even if they're half Japanese, if they don't look Japanese, sometimes people don't hear the Japanese, right? Even if they're speaking it. So the question here is, much like we're all human, if we're used to expecting something, does it affect what you hear and how you say it? Because like a native speaker who is going to learn a secondary language, oftentimes we have to get over that idea of like, oh, we need to practice quite a lot and expose ourselves, because when we hear something and we say something, we have to get used to hearing the new thing and speak the new thing and not hearing the thing that we're used to. But the secondary person, like if you take a native speaker of the target language, right? the target language. And if they're listening to a different native speaker learning the secondary language, are they doing the same thing? As in, oh, it's fun to hear my language, or like the native language I have spoken by another person. Are they legitimately hearing what they want to hear from the person? As in, if they knew I was American, would they hear American enunciation because they're focused on the idea that the person is American or English speaking? Because specifically, the person that stopped by wrote English. But the reality is, I'm not just a native English speaker. So the question is it interesting because they were focused on hearing my English pronunciation of Japanese? Or do they know that because I speak English, I have to sound a certain way? Because I'm not just a native English speaker. Like, what I mean is my enunciation and stuff isn't just English. So the question here is, I'm curious how much of that, if someone didn't come with an expectation, would they be able to pick up on it? The reason why I say this is it's not a bad or a good thing. When you're really focused on what you want to hear, you can hear it more than if you don't know what you're listening for. So a lot of times I've always wondered, and it's not about me saying this correctly. I'm saying, is it even possible for me to say these things if someone is listening for the accent? If you know what I mean. And in this case, it's a country of origin that where 99% of the population are native speakers to this place. English doesn't have that. It's a double standard. English doesn't have that because I listen for what accent they have. Not I listen for the accent I expect them to have. As in, oh, this person speaks English, then I know what accent to expect. When I go and listen as a native English speaker, I don't listen for what I expect to hear. I listen to find out what accent they have. You're talking about stuff like when I listen to a Japanese person, am I listening for a certain accent, or it'll be familiar for what I'm hearing? Yeah. So in the reverse. So for example, like so like if we're English speakers, right? And we go and listen to a Japanese person speak English, are we trying to hear a Japanese accent did English? So then we're hyper focused on, does this person sound like a Japanese person who's speaking a Japanese accented English? Or do we have a tendency as English speakers to listen and try to figure out the accent? Because unlike Japanese people, in English, native speakers are the minority, right? Native speakers are the minority, not the majority. So when we go and listen to someone, we're expecting to discover whatever the accent is. It's hard to presume or focus on what to listen for. In the reverse, though, in Japanese, if you're a native Japanese speaker, you can almost 100% determine that the other person is unlikely to be, unless they are Japanese, right? So it's a really huge distinction. You're either a native Japanese speaker or you find someone, right, online. So much like English and maybe Arabic, right, Hideyoshi, I think for me, it's very normal when I go and listen to someone, even Japanese or Mexican or whatever have you, I don't actually know what accent they're going to have. Because everyone in English, if you go around, even native English speakers can't really have a consistent accent. So I'm always kind of curious. And it's not like they're coming by and saying, oh, does this guy sound like he's being taught the Kanto accent or the Kansai accent? Or no, you see what I mean? So I'm curious. I'm genuinely curious. Is it because everyone can hear the accent because they're focused on what it sounds like? Because I don't know if my Japanese accent will sound the same as a Texan accent. As in, for example, Indy, you and I, if we spoke Japanese and we had like the same amount of training and thing, I don't know if your English accent for Japanese is the same as my English accent for Japanese. Although when a Japanese person comes and sees an English speaker, are they listening for the same thing? Or are they so exposed that they understand that several different English speakers might actually have different English Japanese accents? Kind of a weird thought. I just thought about this right now because it's kind of nice when someone says, I suppose it's fun to listen to English. Yeah. Arabic is when you listen for the accent because you wonder who trained this person. Yeah, who trained this person. Fair enough. Yeah, I'm worried about that. I don't know if my Japanese will still sound Southern because my ears are trained to hear Southern pronunciation, so my Japanese surely has a bit of that in there. If a Japanese person speaks to you in a Texan accent, you laugh at the absurdity of the Texan. No, I would not. I would actually love it. So that's incredibly presumptuous. That is a statement that comes from someone who is monocultural. That's what I'm emphasizing. So in Japan, when you listen for something, it's because 99% of them speak a certain way. As in, like, closely a certain way. I don't come from a background like that. That's why I'm asking the question. If a person speaks Texan, English, I would ask them, how did you manage a Texan accent? I would be absolutely enamored by it. It would be fascinating. It wouldn't be absurd, because I don't think it's absurd for anyone to have a different accent in English. And not only that, on top of that, I'm multicultural. So I expect people to have different accents. I don't expect them to have a certain accent. Or like a Boston accent, that's fine. My young aunt has a British accent. She has a mix of a British accent and a New Yorker accent. So it's before you like swing the whole, if a Japanese person speaks to me with a Texan accent and I'd be floored, that's different. I expect people to have different accents. I don't expect them to have a specific accent. Turnus has heard my talk. Oh, Turnus has heard you talk using Japanese. They seem to be able to understand me. I don't know where Turnus is from though. I see. Yeah, I have no idea where Turnus is from either. They're very passionate learning from anime and manga. So Turnus seems to be really into that. But before we summarize this stuff, I do not have the traditional expectations. I can't speak for other people, but for me, I do not come from a monocultural background. So to expect someone, like if I listen to Indy, I'm not going, even if he told me he's from Texas and all that stuff about learning Japanese, I don't know what that sounds like. Like I don't hyper focus on something. There's no archetype to listen for. What helps me with Japanese a lot of times is I choose an accent, to train on, and then I focus everything around that accent. So that helps me focus on the little intricacies of the Japanese. It works the same way around the other way too. So if someone sees an American and they think the American is speaking American English, then the question is, are they listening for the American accent, or are they actually hearing the American accent? Like, much like it's hard for someone to acquire a second language, right? Because sometimes when you hear yourself say something, you might kind of be hearing something else because you're used to it. Well, the person also listening in has biases as well. So the first thing I know for sure is that I haven't met this person too much, but maybe briefly, and they immediately said my English accent. Well, I have a Fujianese accent too. So, did they pick up the Fujianese accent? Yeah, I know the pronunciation in Duolingo. I'll try to make sure it's all my own sound. Yeah, like I do. You already noticed that I do, right? Indeed, like whenever you say the thing about the cutting out the K's and stuff, like the moment you mention it, it's like, man, I cut out the Q's. You talk like a funny foreigner. So it's so fascinating. I haven't thought about this. Okay. The reason why is, a lot of people talk about Anime Man, right? Sorry, shout outs to him. Like, I really like what he does. It's fantastic. But he talks about a lot about stories where, like, if people see him, they don't think they think not Japanese, right? So you hear that a lot, right? The whole like story, like, oh, if they see him, they're like, wow, you're, when he speaks Japanese, like, wow, your Japanese is so good. It's like, yeah, that's because he's part Japanese. That's the thing I'm talking about. So, for example, when I'm on a phone, or when people are talking to me across like a mic, like a voice chat, immediately they're fine. They're just fine. Like, okay, like, this is some American guy, right? But the moment they see my face and see what I look like, they're expecting something else. So then what they do is they would say like, oh yeah, you say this weird. You say this weird. And like, are you sure that's how you say this stuff? Like, the moment that happens, that's what I mean by, do people hear better? Maybe they hear better. Maybe I do have an accent. I don't know. Or they're hearing what they want to hear and they're not actually having problems. It's like the perception of having the problem. So I've always wondered that. And it happens a lot to someone who speaks something that they don't look like. Only it's not the same the other way around. This is a one-way streak. If you are born, in my opinion, this is my personal opinion, this is a little bit hot. If you're born multicultural, and if you're born monocultural, like strongly monocultural, it's not a bad or a good thing. What I'm saying is the perspective doesn't go both ways. Because here, you're always living in more than one environment. And here, you're living in a homogeneous environment. So there are lots of good rules, consistencies, specialties. Like, what I mean is, if you live in a monocultural environment, often the expectation is the native language that you've acquired is exceptional. It's incredibly great. In a lot of the cases here, the stereotype, and Dogen did mention this, that like when they evaluate each other, like all the influencers in Japanese, usually one of the language, usually one of the languages take a back seat. Because it's very difficult to juggle both. But on rare occasions, people do retain both their accents, as in both their speaking proficiencies. And obviously, Anime Man and the like are the exception. But for me, Fujianese is my second tongue. But it has no like formal schooling. Like, I can't school in that. However, if you talk to me, It's fine. The question is this person hearing in English? And can they tell I have another accent? Or am I just that good, I suppose? I don't think I'm that good. There's no way I'm masking my other accent. I don't even consciously do that. Perhaps, I don't know. Like, can someone tell? But I can tell you one thing. When someone sees me, like sees my face, they immediately think I have a different English accent. Like, not everyone, but it happens frequently enough that they will say that I speak English weirdly. Like, there's something about my English that is different or something like that. So that's so, I wanted to, I wish I could express that in Japanese or something, like the nuance of that in Japanese. I don't think I'm subconsciously doing that, but maybe I am too. So when I go to like a Japanese streamer who's learning English, do I want to hear what I want to hear, or am I just so focused that it's easier to pick up, right? That's so fascinating. I haven't even thought about it the other way. Where have I been listening to other people speak multilingual, like interviews, like Takashi's interviews and stuff? Am I listening for the English accent? So therefore, I think they have an accent, or is it actually there because I'm so good at picking that up? So the reason why I asked that is I truly don't think I want to be fluent, nor do I think I believe I will ever be fluent in the eyes of a person who comes from a monocultural society, as you can't possibly measure up to the conditioning they have as someone who speaks really, really well and trained really, really well with a specific language, in my opinion. So just a little hot take on my end of things, because I honestly think that there are so many people who are fluent in languages, but they don't believe they're fluent in languages, because in my background, I don't expect people to be native like. As in, what I mean is, native is incredibly overrated. It causes hot take alert. Because truly, it's difficult to know, because of the human condition, whether someone is native like or not, dependent on what the person who's doing the evaluation and the person who is doing the speaking. Sometimes you can often hear what you want to hear, and that's one of the biggest struggles with acquiring a second language. And then those who give you feedback will hear what they want to hear as well. Japanese speakers who learn English on stream often take note of Hindi accents on some audio clips. Oh, interesting. Hindi. What does Hindi? Oh, I'm so fascinated now. I need to recalibrate how I interact with multilingual content, because I honestly think I have a bias, because I'm listening for accents sometimes. Like Hindi, I definitely will have two primary form of accents that I'm looking for, and Southern too, like American Southern accent. I'm hyper aware of what I'm looking for. So oftentimes it's like, oh, this person has a Southern accent, but maybe they don't, and I just think they should. There's all these like little things. I hear different accents when I listen to Japanese people, but being an English native, you never assume someone will speak how you're used to hearing it. Yeah. I believe that's why the longer you listen to someone, the better you understand them, so it's personal. Yeah. That's exactly how I'm feeling right now. It's like you know how someone say like, oh yeah, there's no way you can understand this person, and then you go speak with their friend, right? You go speak with a friend and they don't even speak the same language, but they're like, I know what he's saying, or something. Like you get those points. Like it's so weird how this interaction works. So I honestly want to know on Twitch, how many people feel like there's no language learning on Twitch? I know you might be saying, well, yes, there is some language learning, but the concept of language learning when you're streaming is that the people who come to your stream have expectations. And oftentimes when you're learning a language, it might not be true what those expectations are. And I have been curious why language learning hadn't taken off in a sense, because I have a feeling that when you stream and you're learning something and you're constantly interacting with people who are expecting something, then oftentimes those people don't necessarily get the feedback that kind of encourages them or motivates them, because they will often receive the thing like, oh, you sound like X, Y, and Z, but is it true? I don't know. I genuinely don't know. I can tell you now that Indy, you, Lotus, and a select few out of the 40 to 50 people I've talked to so far, the only feedback I have ever gotten was that you're never going to get good enough to be a native Japanese. That's the subtext. It's like, I hear all these problems with the way you speak and learn Japanese. The question is, are they actually problems, or are they problems ascribed to expectation? Just a thought. If there are some few people who always ask, I don't understand why language learning is more popular. It's kind of a communal thing online and stuff, right? Online and stuff. It's like, well, if I'm a pretty sturdy guy, I think, humbly so, I think I'm at least above average in how sturdy I am in terms of like trying to be motivated and stuff. But generally speaking, maybe in my 20s, I would have I genuinely speaking, if I was in my 20s, I would give up a long time ago. I mean, like, I would give up interacting with people. I would isolate myself and learn in the privacy of my own, like the whole streaming thing, because it's generally negative feedback or dissonant feedback from those other people. And now my question is, you might benefit a lot from scrutiny, but at the same time, I don't know the feedback is accurate. So that's kind of the thing. Now I'm worried if I have said anything indirectly as an observer for English. So things like, oh yeah, you know, this is what it may be said, and then when I'm saying it, it might sound different, or it might be different to someone else. And I'm always curious how much impediment that is to be one or the same. I'm not suggesting that I do this very often, because my perspective is very different. I actually do expect everyone to have different English accents. If they are all the same, I would be shocked. I would be shocked when everyone has the same accent, actually. And if I go to Japan, my first culture shock is probably, if I stay in Tokyo, everyone sounds like they have one accent. That would be kind of shocking to me, actually. Like, because I'm not used to that. I'm not used to hearing everyone having the same accent. My two closest friends, or like the friends that I hang out with now, one is from West Coast and one's from East Coast, and they sound dramatically different. Very dramatically different, actually. So, hey, Jamie, konnichiwa. Konnichiwa. No, wait. Konnichiwa. We shouldn't do this. How are you doing, Jamie? I'm guilty of telling you that because I hear you speaking a different kana and that changes the word. Yeah, true. I have a Japanese streamer that I follow to train my ears on how she speaks Japanese. Interesting. Oh yeah, I know. But here's the thing about learning, right? Here's the thing about learning. Every time, no matter what, you're going to be expecting me to be speaking a different kana here and there because I only do the thing that makes me make mistakes. So the question is, are you expecting me to make mistakes or are you not? At some point, like being around me, you'll probably get used to the idea that no matter what, you'll always hear me not practice things I already know. I'm always practicing things I don't know yet. So the question is, are you expecting me and you're being tolerant of me speaking, messing up my kana or not? I guess I've already disclosed that I don't stream things with things I'm comfortable with. If I did, then they would look different. Like, for example, I could read English texts and it would be more consistent than always constantly learning new things. So it's a very different environment. I'm not doing what I know how to do. I'm always doing what I don't know how to do. So they will be naturally going to have different kana because I make errors. If I was practicing things I don't, like the kanji section, those things come rapidly, as in because they're practiced, they're well practiced. Other than that, I'm always in a situation where I don't practice. I haven't had the contextual practice. So I don't know. If you feel guilt, that's probably gonna be normalized, I suppose, at some point. I don't know how often you do it. I feel a lot of people, in my opinion, are far more insecure about publicly doing anything that they haven't well rehearsed or practiced. So oftentimes, the biggest stretch for their streaming content is to be good at something. So like a person being like a professional, I don't know, like a pro esports person will play things that they're good at, not things that they're purposely bad at. They don't like the idea of retraining, in my opinion, because they invested so much time and passion into the selective skills that they have. So for me, I will be saying kana, I will be messing up kana, right? Would they change the word? I honestly think no, but you can definitely hear what you want in terms of how it changes the word. But I don't think over time I can most definitely communicate with someone and they will know what I'm saying in Japanese. Much so that I'm going to feel the same about Mandarin and Spanish. So whether I choose to always do something when I'm good at, I don't have many of those streams. I like to think I'm someone that doesn't assume that someone's going to say before they say it. I usually remind exactly what the person said with mistakes. I usually remember exactly what the person said with mistakes. Oh, okay. That's interesting. Huh. I do this like otearai. I checked the one time I did say atearai twice. But the thing is, some of the times I did say otearai. And also, I've said otearai a lot of times already. Before atearai. I do say ane and oni and one sometimes too, instead of ane and ani. So I do hear my mistakes. However, my mistakes are not the fact that I deliberately done something habitually, because I typically do not do these things long enough to do it habitually yet, right? Actually, the downside of my approach right now is that most things are not habitual. So I haven't done anything consistently enough to develop a habit of whether beneficial or negligible. Beneficial or negative, I suppose. Like undesirable. Still, sometimes sometimes the thing I'm describing now is often when someone tells me what their problem is, I always worry if I'm looking for that problem, if you know what I mean. So instead of having someone explain to me what their problem is, I often feel I might be able to be more helpful when that person doesn't describe their problem to me. Because oftentimes I've always wondered, do I see a problem where there isn't a problem? And I've convinced myself that there is a problem. I don't know. It's a philosophical question. It's one worth considering. And I know and what I'm saying is, if you hear it, then you clearly know it, right? Like, if you know that a person is focused on pronunciation, then you know they probably picked it up. So I'm less likely to trust my own judgment because I'm less focused on pronunciation than you are. So for sure that I would most likely know that I probably said something not correct, because it's more likely me, since I haven't focused on pronunciation that much, or I tried to focus on it in a sense that as well as I can. But I wouldn't sit there and drill myself on pronunciation. Probably not. My English accent is funny though. Now I'm curious. I want to watch a YouTube video now where it has an English accent Japanese person next to a whatever you want to call it, a Japanese person, and I want to see if I can distinguish between the two. Yeah, do you assume what the answer is before they present the problem? Yeah, that's kind of a really big stickler for me. I've asked a lot of times what that is. Oftentimes when I meet a stranger, the nice thing is I don't know anything about the stranger, so that helps with the stranger. And that's usually why you don't try to become friends with someone you're trying to help. I know how that sounds when it comes to, like, if someone is really big doo-doo, big trouble, your history with that person can really affect how you're understanding the problem. So there's a mixed bag. You can have someone that knows you and then someone that doesn't know you, so you'll have two different opinions. So you aren't listening to the problem, you're already convinced that the answer to their problem is. Yeah, there is a chance that can happen. No, it's based on, it's versus, so if someone comes to you, say this is a stranger, right? If someone comes to you and they declare a problem, that is a little bit different from, I think this person has a problem, let's investigate. So on one hand, this is going to be deduced. On the other hand, this is primed. So when someone comes to a Twitch streamer who's learning Japanese, or I'm going to watch a Twitch streamer who's learning English, the idea is you are primed. You are primed to think something, right? So when it comes to problems, why is it that 95% of my interactions with language learning community is predicated on the fact that I'm American, that I speak American English? It's so strong that it's not even apparent that I'm Asian. Just a thought, right? So what is the problem? Well, the problem is obviously I speak American English. So all my feedbacks often come from the problem of having American English as my speaking language. So that's a big leap. That's a really big leap. Even when visibly, it's so powerful. Even when visibly, that has no consideration for what I look like and stuff as well. And it's a totally fine thing actually. So that just means my language is the predicated core of all the things versus what I look like. And that's a good and a bad thing, yes and no, right? The idea is there are lots of things you can observe about a person. And if you focus on the thing that you want to observe, then you're probably very good at it. Very good at it. Until it's dissonant. Then you also are very blind to dissonance as well. So while at the same time, there's no possibility that my background affected how I pronounce Japanese words. It's largely because I speak American English that is the culprit for the feedback. Interestingly enough, quite literally all my advice comes from the idea that I'm using Duolingo in English and that I speak English. Right. So, curious. How much does that affect the feedback? I'll tell you, for me, it's almost all the feedback. All the feedback deals with the idea that I'm English. Like, I use English. And it's interesting. And so far, most of the time when I get English feedback, I usually try to respectfully tell them that for me it's different. So like 80% of the time, I'm gonna say 15% of the time it's very informative because they're spot on, but 80% of the time I agree with them, where like I don't have these things like for example, like what is the first week stuff? Ri ra do re ru, yes, right? That'd be something. Or I'm doing stress accent versus pitch accent. Don't worry, English people are bad at listening to pitch accent, so that's why they can't speak a Japanese pitch accent. The list goes on. It goes really far, but these are some of like the early ones, like within the first week. People assume I don't watch or listen to visual novels, VNs, or manga, or anime, so they advise me to watch these things and do these things. Right? People assume that I'm bad with grammar. And this one's a deep cut not because I'm British English speaker. It's because I'm an American English speaker. So I get a lot of advice on understanding grammar when, for me, humbly so, I scored in the 99th percentile in grammar. And to this day, I still love grammar. So, no, it's not that. It's largely associated with the fact that American English, bad grammar. So what are most of the, it's not that someone is saying, oh, you got it wrong, you got the grammar wrong because you're learning. It's often the phrase is, oh, most English speakers get this wrong. And to preface it, most American English speakers get this wrong. Most Americans flip their verb object. Most Americans have problems understanding implicit nouns or implicit subjects. Right? And then all the while, most of my conversations on digressions deal with these things. Like, we talk about these things because they're normal to me. It's fun. It's really fun. And I even try hard to find English examples of things like implicit subjects, because it does happen. It does happen in English. So, curious. Very curious. And I think I do the same. Like, being human, right? Being human, I probably naturally do that too. So oftentimes maybe I should consider that a distinct possibility. I could be hearing things and seeing things that I'm very passionate about, but it might be something that I'm manufacturing. I don't know. Fun. I already shared this story before. Oftentimes, when I was younger, when someone hears me, they speak their mora. We'll just use mora as a Japanese, like a Japanese reference. The mora is, say, a certain speed. When someone sees me and they talk to me, their mora goes down. Or as in, not actually, it goes up, so to speak. So everything gets longer. Everything gets longer. All the words get longer. As opposed to slowing down, or like there's a noticeable slowdown. Sometimes volume goes up. Volume goes up because we're talking about English now. And then occasionally emphasis goes up. But the stress is not because the stress is on a different syllable, is that the volume gets stressed more with the higher beat. So you notice these things a lot. If you're a person who is constantly in a situation where you speak and it doesn't meet your expectations. So much like Hideyoshi said that if I would have saw a Japanese person with a Texan accent, I would be absolutely shocked. I would be absolutely enamored. Would I be shocked? Possibly too. I would say yes, to some extent, but not to the extent that probably the person like Hideyoshi is referring to. It would be more surprised in the sense that, oh yeah, that could happen, as opposed to, whoa, that's impossible. Because if that's impossible, then I'm a walking exception. I don't want to make it so that it's weird for an Asian American to have an American accent. That's actually very normal to me. So it's really interesting. I gotta think about this. I'm gonna listen to a bunch of people and see if it's easier for me to pick up a Japanese English accent from a fluent Japanese English speaker versus, like, for example, comparing Dogen with someone who's born in Japan and lived in Japan and like nationalized and they're fluent in English. Just so you know, the cool thing that, in my opinion, Dogen does is a lot of times when he talk about like pronunciation and stuff, right? When he talks about all of that, he actually is in contact, or he curates a person who is Japanese, who also is bilingual in English to an extreme extent. So not only does he do both himself, oftentimes when he's getting really in the nitty gritty, he also gets an example of someone who speaks both. So he double checks himself as well when he's listening, which I really appreciate. I don't necessarily think most people do or want to do that. And it might not even matter. You know, all this stuff is tangential at best. I can tell you for certain that pretty much no one has said, oh, you're speaking about what I expect from someone who is like me, as opposed to, oh, yeah, that's really funny. Like you sound, you sound very funny. Like, okay. Good thing it's fine for me. Hopefully, anyone who wants to learn Japanese is fine with that too, because I feel like at least some of my pronunciations and kana are on point, and some are not. But sometimes it makes me feel like everything is off point, and I'm like, I probably strongly disagree that I would make it so complicated to understand. Anyways, we'll see in another 6 months or so, right? Still got a long ways to go. Okay, I use a dictionary to I use a dictionary every day, no kidding. Manga 翻訳します。 I forgot the O.
よく
よく
図書館
に行きますか? Oh, don't give me that. よく図書館に行きますか? You forgot the O also? Oh, heck can show you an O. You watch Xiaoma at all, Indy? You ever watch Xiaoma at all? I always... So, here's the thing, right? I love when people grind, people like are endless. Nope, you're very busy. Okay. So, there's something so endearing about people who stick to their craft, right? Stick to their craft. And it's been so long since I've stuck to something. But just to give you an idea, every person, every like influencer that I've come across that are like maybe like a gold standard, right? The ones that have very thriving communities and very proactive and stuff. So the language that they chose to build their careers on, they have over 10 years of experience. And then even more so, 5 additional years in which they breeze over because it's ups and downs, right? And it's absolutely mind-boggling how people who watch these influencers could attempt to translate their experiences into things that take 1 month, like 2 months. And this hustle is so real in language learning. It's so real. I feel like a lot of times I'm fighting an uphill battle against people who think you can complete language learning, if you know what I mean. Like phrases like how to become fluent. The idea that even the notion that you have an end goal as a way to advise people is mad. It's almost maddening to me. Like it's not like I'm gonna learn Japanese and stop. Like it's not something to be completed. You don't in my opinion, it's so alien to me to think that you complete something once you become fluent. Like this isn't an endpoint discussion. It's a what are you doing now discussion. Are you having fun? Do you like sounding like an American person speaking Japanese? Because I don't really care. Like in my opinion, like if I continue to sound like this for the rest of my life, it's perfectly fine. Because you know why? I'm not looking to end anything. I will use Japanese as much as I can whenever I can. You don't stop eating after you're full, right? You don't ever stop eating after you're full and say like you've completed the task of eating. So tomorrow you're not going to try to improve your eating or work on your eating and all that stuff. It's kind of like how you're maintaining your athleticism, Indy. You don't stop after you reach a milestone. And this milestone of fluency is, I almost feel like fluency itself, this word right here, fluency, or any like contextual flip of it, like fluent, this to me, here's a hot take. I want to write an essay on the toxicity that comes from this term. Toxicity in the language learning community. And it's not a toxicity in which it's directed. It's not a directed toxicity. So there really isn't a malice point to it. It's using this as though it's objective. If you professional linguists, I hope they agree with this. Maybe if you ask, what are the outstanding questions in the field of linguistics, right? This is something I would say if you ask a physicist these things, right? What are the outstanding questions? What are the $1 million Nobel Prize questions? What is a syllable? What constitutes as a language? All the fundamental questions that people use to measure fluency, there aren't actual answers to. Like conceptually. Are you going to get a different answer every time you ask these questions? Yes, you are going to. They're the $1 million questions. What constitutes a syllable? What constitutes a language? What is grammar? In science, no matter how much detail you get and how objective you become, there will be more questions. So when you view trying to reach whatever this is, and every single time you open your mouth or go on your keyboard and you tell someone, oh, if your main objective is to become fluent, this is useless. And that's objective. You're talking an uphill battle towards someone that you have absolutely no idea how ignorant that comment is. Or like Duolingo, well, it's not really useless, but it's basically useless because it's so suboptimal, it's useless. That's objective. Like, well, your main goal is fluency. You haven't even declared what fluency means. It's $1 million question. I would love to ask the Nobel Prize laureate who has a universal definition for fluency in which everyone agrees on. So when you think of suboptimal and you say Duolingo doesn't contribute to your steps towards fluency, and that's why it's useless, what is fluency to you? Does it involve vocabulary? If it does, you're wrong. If it's ear training, you're wrong. If it's looking at kana, you're wrong. If it's looking at kanji, you're wrong. So this term is, it's the end game. It's such a lofty thing. Like for me, if I were to make a counterexample, an analogy to what this is like, I would say the end goal of life is happiness. So now I'm going to frame it as an end goal. Indy, in order to achieve happiness, stop doing the following things because they're suboptimal. And then your first question would be to ask me, how are you measuring happiness? What are the metrics for happiness? Why are you giving me this advice for this thing that you can't quantify? And then I would go and say, well, if you think positively all the time in your life, then it is the optimal approach to maximizing happiness. Once again, and then I would say it's objectively true because lots of people believe this. If they are positive in their life, it leads to happiness. That is subjectivity. And in language learning, so much of this, you replace happiness with fluency. Well, define fluency for me, please. Is because as far as I know, happiness is like a lot of things. So is fluency. It's a lot of things. So how can you be so confident that you know something is useless or not? It's so absurd. It's almost like when people use the word fluency, there's a universal constant somewhere. Where I'm supposed to just naturally understand. Like, oh yeah, you mean that fluency. You're right. You make a great point. Yeah, definitely. Your fluency is definitely the same as my fluency. Yeah. So this is definitely a purely objective comment that you just made, because somehow we all agree on the standardizations of fluency when even the longest, most professional people around you, even your colleagues, can't agree on what fluency means, let alone what's a syllable, what is a sound, what is the optimal alphabet, or whatever, however you want to categorize it. So fine. I mean, it'd be nice if I wasn't talking about these things, but what I mean is I'm not making this stuff up. If I was making this stuff up, it would be worse than this. Like it would be less detailed. I don't think like this most of the time. I don't go around selling happy pills. At least I hope I don't. Maybe I'm giving the wrong impressions. to people. I don't sell happy pills. I sell time. Time is what I'm selling, guys. I'm selling my time. Just a thought.